Hey everybody, we're going to get started with our afternoon sessions. Right, so this afternoon, we are going to be shifting gears a bit. So shifting away from the technical aspects of brownfields, focusing more on environmental justice and community involvement. So my name is Betsy Adams, and I am a community outreach specialist with DEQ. Pretty new, been with DEQ for about 6 months now. And so it's been a great opportunity for me to learn more about brownfields and the Brownfields program and just how complex it is. So we are going to talk about brownfields, environmental justice, and resources available that apply to both topics. So I'll be giving a short presentation, and then Barbara Allen from the Mountains and Plains Thriving Communities Collaborative will be talking after me. So next slide, please. So we have quite a few people in this room with very different backgrounds, different levels of experience in brownfields, environmental justice, and community engagement. So I wanted to take just a few minutes to talk with you, and many of you in this room could probably give a better presentation on this topic than me, but stuck with me, and talk about, have a shared understanding of environmental justice and how it intersects with brownfields. Next slide. So it's never best practices to start out a presentation with a definition, but I think that it's important to consider EPA's definition of environmental justice. So it's the just treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of income, race, color, national origin, tribal affiliation, or disability, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. And I think it's important to consider their definition since they guide so much of our environmental work, including environmental justice and brownfields, through their regulations, funding, and programs. The next slide. So when you think about environmental justice, I think you need to consider factors that lead to and continue to cause environmental injustices, and also to consider how we can work towards and to get to actual environmental justice. This includes acknowledging the fact that disadvantaged communities are disproportionately affected by environmental harms. And these communities also have inequitable access to environmental benefits. Things like clean air, clean water, open spaces, parks, public transportation, etc. And much of this is due to historic factors, historical zoning practices, unequal distribution of government resources, and not engaging with communities in the decision-making processes. Also to think about that definition, just treatment of people. So all people deserve fair protection from environmental and human health hazards and from the cumulative impacts of pollution, climate change, and other environmental dangers or burdens. This is also, we need to recognize this as an opportunity to prioritize areas that have the highest needs. So looking at communities that maybe in the past have not received the equitable resources that they deserve. And also thinking about that definition again, we throw around the term, at least in my world, we throw around the term meaningful involvement quite a bit. So thinking about meaningful involvement as making community members meaningful participants in the decision-making process and helping them to engage in that decision-making process, making sure they have access to the information that they need to engage in that process, and that it's in a format that is, understandable, plain language that makes sense to them. And so next slide. So that intersection, so brownfields are, as is pretty clear, they are an environmental justice issue. So did a little research on the EPA website. There's more than 450,000 brownfields in the US, and most of these brownfields you can find in disadvantaged communities. And as we all know, as if you didn't know before this week, brownfields cost a lot of money, they take a lot of resources, and they take a lot of time. And these communities where they're located are the least resourced and have They're least likely to have the time, money, and resources to put into these projects. So this is that intersection again. It's sort of an opportunity. Brownfields projects are an opportunity to address environmental justice. So it's an opportunity to approach things through an equitable redevelopment process. So opportunity to advance equity while addressing environmental justices and meeting community needs at the same time. So again, the structure of EPA's program for brownfields and many other federal programs, thanks to the Justice 40 initiative, EJ has risen to the top. It's a factor that needs to be considered in many federal programs, and it's an opportunity to benefit disadvantaged communities. You need to focus on communities that are unable to access funds and other ways to involve the communities in the decision-making process. And in the end, the inclusion of the equity and environmental justice makes a visible difference in communities. So not only are we addressing needs of the communities, priorities of the communities, but we're also creating physical spaces that are healthy and vibrant for those communities. And so equitable brownfields redevelopment, it requires community engagement, which takes time and effort. It takes that time to build the trust, to build a successful partnership and make a commitment to and practicing redevelopment as a way to build trust with residents. So you need to take the time to learn about the community. You need to recognize that past lived experiences communities may have led to low trust in government programs. So you need to take the time to develop that trust and recognize that you might not be the right messenger. DEQ is not always the right messenger when going in and talking with communities. And if you're not the right person to be talking with these communities, you need to be working with partners. Identify partners and identify local stakeholders, trusted messengers within the communities you work with. You also need to meet people where they're at. Take the time to, I think that the basic tenet of good community engagement that don't expect people to come to you. And you need to figure out if you're going to engage and meaningfully engage with people, what's a convenient place for them to meet? What's a good time for them to meet? What are the barriers to them meeting with you? Do they need childcare? Do they need help with transportation to the meeting site? So addressing those different factors. Providing the resources and background information in a format that works for them, and to help the community. All these steps are, key to making sure that your community is informed, that you're building a relationship with the community, and that you are addressing the community's priorities. Not, you might come in and say, we have this funding available. We see it as an environmental issue, but as we've been talking about today, what are those sort of co-benefits of these projects? Does the community need a community center? A big topic that we talked about today is housing. So I think it's figuring out what the different priorities are of the community and building those into your brownfields project. And through this process, you're working with the community as a partner. You're building community buy-in. And so that was really, I just wanted to do a brief overview of that. And we're going to spend the rest of the afternoon talking about MapTech, which is a resource available to you all. And then also we'll talk specifically about engaging communities in the brownfields process. We'll get back. Thanks.
Happy to, yeah. Test. I have to turn this on. Okay, I think we're on the ready. It's really nice to be here. I've learned a lot in the short time I've been here, so
That's pretty cool. My name is Barb Allen. I'm an engagement specialist with the MAPTEC program, based out of Montana State University. We have officially launched as of August 14th, I think our date was. So a couple months in the running here, so. So again, meeting communities where they're at to build capacity. These are environmental justice initiatives that we are, working with communities on. Clean energy, renewable energy, energy efficiency, even into food sovereignty, food access. So kind of runs the gamut of environmental justice. So what do? We provide technical assistance, not just me. We have Region 8. We have all the land-grant universities on board with us. And so we have subject matter experts within all of those. And we have quite heavy hitters in the environmental justice world from a national perspective on board with us as well. So when a community comes to us and says, I have a project idea, we have a conversation and I know that I have some really heavy hitters that I can turn to, depending on what their project looks like. So we want to find a grant for them. That's the number request is money. So we will do some hunting on that end for them. We will identify and use resources to develop a proposal. So a lot of our communities that are coming forward have never written a grant proposal. They really have never done any sort of project planning or budget planning. And so they're really starting at the ground level. So in addition to ourselves and our partners, we kind of walk them through that process, hoping to build capacity at the local level so that at some point down the road, they don't need us anymore. They can kind of take that ball and run with it. And again, project planning, step by step. It sounds easy, right? Until you go sit down to do it. And there's multiple people involved and there's a timeline involved and all these sorts of things that they kind of need help walking through that process. So myself and partners do that. And then again, connect with other groups doing similar work. So right now I've had an influx of food security and food access projects that have come forward. So we do have a number of food deserts in this state. By the way, I cover Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Also, we serve all 28 federally recognized tribes in the region. We have a tribal engagement specialist who works directly with them. But just connecting all these groups that are doing sort of similar work to see if there's a way that they can streamline their processes by working together. So we try to make them up. And then build capacity. I've been talking about this with a number of people here today, and those words really mean something different depending on where you are. You talk about capacity for me and the technical assistance requests that I have coming in. These folks don't even have a grant writer locally. So it really is difficult for them to move that ball, down the field, if you will. Sometimes there just isn't a warm body in the tiny town that can manage a project. So we are really running into some barriers even before the conversation of funding happens. But what our goal is to work with these communities to build that capacity. If you can bring somebody in, we will do a grant writing training. We will do a funding and organizational development training. We will do what's needed to bolster them, to put them in a position where they can start looking for grants, mainly federal grants. So these are just our partners, all the land grants, and the sort of non-land grant partners. The Alliance for Tribal Clean Energy, they work on a national level with all tribes in the US in renewable energy. A lot of it's solar and wind. So they've been such an important partner. The Environmental Protection Network, do you guys know who that is? Those are ex-EPA employees who sort of left when an administration came in that was going to sort of stomp out a lot of the work they had done. So there's about 650 of them in this network. We turn to them a lot for technical assistance. The Center for Social Creativity, they're really our partner in a lot of it is capacity building. So they build curriculums around grant writing, organizational development, finding funding, budgeting. So all aspects of that, they're putting out a curriculum for us that we can use it throughout the whole region. And then the Community Infrastructure Center, they were a partner right out of the gate when we got the grant. Their whole, for me, as an engagement specialist, I always ask myself, how can they benefit the communities that are coming forward and asking me for assistance? So what this center does for us, they have a database that is supposed to sweep all funding databases that are out there. Grants.gov, you know, you name it, they're supposed to be pulling those into the system. My communities can put their project information into that database and it will match them with a grant. So it will say, you know, maybe they're doing air monitoring. They will put in their information depending on the dollar amount they're asking for. And this database will say, you are an 85% match for X, Y, and Z grants. So this isn't as robust as we had hoped it would be at this point in time, because finding funding for these communities is probably the most arduous process that we go through with them. It just takes a lot of time to dig up funding for these guys. So I'm hoping as time goes by, that database will be more populated and be a little bit more robust, so that it's more usable for folks to use. But I have high hopes, so. So this is our team. Julia Hager, there's the PI, you know, spent a good 18 months, 2 years trying to put this thing together. Our region, Region A, is about a year behind all the other regions in the US as far as a TICTAC goes. So we're called a TICTAC, which is a Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center. And we came in about a year after all the other regions in the country did. So we really hit the ground running because some of this work was already being done and word had got out. And so these are just our partners. Mindy Hills out of Colorado State, Leah Bradford, she's out of Butte. She's our tribal engagement specialist working with all tribes in the region. Megan, up at the top there, she's with JSI. I do believe somebody was here yesterday with grant makers. Too bad I couldn't be here because I don't think I've met her yet. What a good place. Ben Williamson is our regional program manager. He's based out of Bozeman at MSU as well. There I am. I used to be on campus. I now live in Florence. So a little south of Missouri there. Austin's based out of Utah. He's the engagement specialist for Utah. And Melissa Bosworth is the Center for Social Creativity director, working a lot with our curriculums to get some of these communities hopefully in a better position to seek funds down the road. And then just a list of all the other folks that we bring on board, and I really have no qualms about knocking on anybody's door. If a community comes to me with a request, I will give them my blood, sweat, and tears to see if I can't get them to where they need to be. That's my whole job, is to help them. Whether it's I do it directly with them, or I look out for technical service providers in the region, whatever it takes just to get them to where they need to be. So, you know, two interconnected problems: environmental, climate, energy, justice issues. We know that certain geographies experience, you know, an unfair share of negative environmental consequences, and lacking meaningful involvement to participate. And I think that in some of our communities, it's certainly at the forefront. Some communities really have it together. They're small, but they have the right people at the table, and they are movers and shakers. And, you know, so they're not all shaped the same. They don't all look the same. So every community is different. Underinvestment is really the common thing that runs through most of these communities, especially the smaller communities in our state. So there's a map out there, the IRA, called the IRA disadvantaged map. And it will define if the area that you want to work in is truly overburdened and disadvantaged. So that map has changed over time. When it first came out, I really had problems with it because so many of my communities that had come forward, in my mind, I'm like, they're absolutely disadvantaged and overburdened, but they're not on the map. And so as time went by, you just started to see that map change. And I don't know if it's just that I was, complaining, but I think it really, out of the gate, people were like, you gotta be kidding me. There's more than just 6 tiny little chunks of Montana that are, underserved. Tribes, they all check the box. They are automatically, underserved. They are Justice 40 community, as well as Superfund sites, which you guys are very much familiar with, so go ahead. So just a snapshot here of, a lot of the technical assistance requests that have come in for us. I am working with Libby right now, not with asbestos, believe it or not. About 20 years ago, they got an EPA wood stove change out grant. So they went around to low-income households, changed out, if needed, stoves, inserted good wood burning stoves. And now 20 years has passed, and to them, they think, hey, we should probably get back into some of these homes and make sure they're safe, that they're operating properly, and so they're looking for money to kind of go back into these homes that they put these stoves in to make sure that they're essentially maintained and operating properly. So I won't go too much into this, but yes, we're all familiar with the Justice 40 initiative that came out, the IRA, the BIL money. Our grant is, we're a line item on the EPA budget, so we aren't a direct descendant, if you will, of IRA money or BIL money. And I get asked this question a lot with the new administration, what does the future hold for you? And all I know at this moment is out of the 5-year agreement that we have with EPA, we're secure in 2 years of funding. Just the way it's allocated and appropriated, but after that, we don't know. So fingers crossed. I'm just gonna keep operating like we're gonna go for the full 5 years and see what happens, but take from that. So, before we had the EJ Small Grants Program, I think it was a million years ago that I worked with the tribes and state of the tribal colleges running some of these small grants through their universities. And then go ahead, moving on. Of course, we've got this windfall of money. So ours, like I said, is a 5-year grant. So we will be here through 2029. Hopefully. So yeah, go ahead. So what we're looking at now, maybe many of you have seen this, but Headwaters, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that group. They do a lot of really good research on the rural communities in Montana. This is for the northern, the Great Plains states of Region 8. Montana's number of counties that are considered to have low capacity, not even moderate, but low, is 68%. So almost 70% of our state, the capacity is just not there at the moment. So that's kind of what we're working with. It's been one of the biggest hurdles and challenges that has come forth. So we're trying to work with other groups to see if we can make this better. So the tic-tacs, this is just showing you where all of them exist. They all run a gamut. We had a meeting with Region 7 about a week ago. I was asking them, how many TA requests do you guys have on your docket? And for their whole team, they told me they had 43. So that's 43 CBOs, nonprofits, local governments that have come forward looking for technical assistance. So we have almost 100 right now within Region 8. I alone for Montana have 45. So just Montana, the folks coming to me for technical assistance equals the entire region of Region 7. So it's a lot, and I didn't anticipate that. I don't think anybody did. Colorado is right in the same boat. I think they got like 45 on their docket. So very, very busy. I did not anticipate this many communities coming forth with really good project ideas, really worthwhile. So I kind of busted my butt to make sure they're served in the best way possible. Move forward. So yeah, again, that increased capacity. One of the things that was proposed in this grant application. I had no part in it. They want to bring on what are called community navigators. So these are people that we would come in and train, whether it's grant writing, organizational development, budgeting, project management, maybe it's a community plan that they might want to. So we can come in and train these navigators, and then our hope is that now they have someone in the community that's in the know. You know, somebody that's a direct link to, you know, move that ball along the court. I don't know how this is gonna pan out. I just wanted to put that in your brains in case, as we march through the state, if there's anybody that thinks that would be worthwhile for them, I would really like to know about it so that we can make those connections. So again, you know, with that capacity, winning and managing funds. So yesterday there was a gal here from JSI Grant Makers. That's our regional pot of money, if you will. Their whole mission was to make the grant application process easier, more streamlined, not so arduous for these small communities. So it's just easier for them to get an application in. One of their strong suits, in my opinion, is that they won't automatically reject an application if there's something in the application that's off. So maybe the numbers in the budget are a little off. They'll get a hold of the applicant and they'll work one-on-one with them to correct that problem. Maybe in the narrative, they didn't quite spell out a couple of things that help form that picture in the grant reviewer's mind. They'll get a hold of them and say, look, we just have a couple questions. So it's really forgiving, and you just don't see that in a federal grant process. They just kick you to the curb and, you know, you're rejected. So I'm really hoping that grant makers in many cases can be a game changer. I don't know how competitive it is at the moment, how many Region A applications they're going to get hit with. I think it's going to be a good share, but they have 40 million bucks. So that's what they have for our region. So I'm hoping to acquire as much of that from Montana as I can. So who can we serve? We can serve anybody except for-profit businesses. And there's an exception to that. I do believe if they're minority owned or woman owned, I think we can take them on board. So I haven't had any come forth yet. If they do, I will get clarification for them, but I do believe that's my understanding. Individuals from EJ communities, again, there's that IRA map that defines that. However, in meetings with grant makers, they have conveyed to us that even if you don't fall in that area on the map, that you can use census tract data, you can use county health rankings, you can use other data out there to support your argument that the community is overburdened and underserved. So if they're not on that map, that doesn't mean you automatically just, you know, shut the door and walk away. So we're trying to expand what that means to grant makers. So yeah, urban, rural, remote, it really doesn't matter. Tribal governments, tribal nonprofits, community-based, local, state. I have a lot of local governments coming forth, looking for various technical assistance on their project ideas. Community-based and grassroots organizations. I had no idea that Montana had so many environmental groups out there. These little nonprofits or CBOs, there's a ton of them in the state. I think I'm hearing from all of them, which is great. So one of the questions that comes up is, you know, where our office resides is not a Justice 40 community, but the population that we're serving is. That's all you need to show. So you can live in Billings, but maybe the work being done is on a full reservation or in another Justice 40 community. Totally fine. So it doesn't matter where the money runs through, but that J40, and most of you probably already know this, the idea behind the number 40 was that 40% of the funds go to an overburdened or disadvantaged community. So that's kind of the name of the game. They would have to demonstrate that in an application. Yeah, I haven't had any faith-based organizations come forward in churches. Haven't had any unions or worker organizations. That we've only been going for months, so So this is kind of how the process works. Sometimes we get emails, but the number one way to get in contact with one of the engagement specialists is to go to the website, and it's really small, montana.edu/thriving communities. On the website, there's a button that says request help. Click that button and you'll get a form. You just put your name in there, a couple sentences about your project, where you're located, how best to contact you, and I'm alerted instantly. So these can pop into my inbox all day. Like, oh, somebody new came up. Oh, there's another one. And so I go into our platform and I can see who it is and what they want. And within 2 days, I made contact with them and we set up a meeting so that I can better understand what they are really looking to do. And then I can kind of determine their technical assistance needs. Some of them just want to bounce ideas off of me. Totally fine. Some are looking for the whole kit and caboodle. So it doesn't look the same. I don't think I have any two that look the same in my docket right now. So yes, we have some upcoming training opportunities around funding strategies, grant writing, grants management, organizational development, organizational sustainability. These are the things that we're going to be doing with some of these communities if they want it. So yeah. So our four main services that we provide in all TICACs provide pretty much the same services across the country. Finding grants and funding, hardest part of all of it. You could hire someone full-time to do nothing but that. I wish we did have somebody like that. We can do capacity building training. We'll be doing this in Lincoln County. And I will also be doing this with a group I've never heard of, the Thompson Chain of Lakes Stewardship Coalition. I don't know if anybody's heard of them. It's a new one on me. So we're going to be doing a bunch of capacity building training with them. Partnership building and then access to experts. And I think that's probably one of our biggest pluses are the subject matter experts and the technical assistance providers that we have on board. So yeah, you know, that old place-based theory of change and capacity building, theory of change. So it is relationship building. And, you know, those words can kind of sound fluffy, but for us and the work I'm doing currently in this position, it absolutely is relationship building. Just because of the amount of communication that you're having between yourself and your TA request. So it isn't just between them and I bring in the experts within our region, our subject matter experts. And we just try to wrap all of this in with these communities to, again, just get them where they want to be. Some of these grants, they're only asking for 25, 30,000. Some are way more than what Grant Acres is putting out, even if they're tier 3 funding. So we can kind of get them some money for a year or two to do some planning. And in the meantime, be looking for those bigger chunks of money. It's just all in how you strategize and plan for what they want to do. Oh, good. It's bigger letters there. So there's our website. That is the best way. If you have questions, you can use that email that goes right directly to Ben, our project manager. You can get a hold of us any way you want. Somebody will respond and put you on our docket, for lack of a better term. So if you guys have projects in mind, if you know people in your communities that are thinking of projects that are, you know, EJ related, and again, EJ can mean outside of just water, air, soil. You know, there's a lot of other topics that are wrapped into that. So keep that in mind too. And if they're unsure or you're unsure, get a hold of us and we'll figure it out together. Okay, that's all I got. Any questions? Yes.
In the beginning, when you were talking about the fines and apply for grants, is there a limit to the type of grant funding that you guys research or help?
No. No. Like I said, they run the gamut. Some are in the tens of millions, some are, you know, 20, 40,000. But what it helps when they give us that information is where do we look for money? So it just narrows our search. But no, they're, you know, grant makers, they're funding tiers, which they probably went into yesterday, I think. Oh, they did,
No,
a little bit. Okay, that's too bad. There's 3 tiers of funding that they give out. Tier 1 is assessment. And that's, I think that one's 150,000 for a year. That's if you're going to do air monitoring, or even down to doing questionnaires or surveys with the community, any research, any data collection. That's kind of that tier 1. Tier 2 are sort of planning grants. So you have your data, maybe it isn't data driven, whatever project you're working on, but they give you 1 to 2 years, and I think that was 250. I have to look again, all on our website, by the way. And so then they have a tier 3 funding. That one caps at 350,000 for 2 years. That's kind of the implementation, the development tier, if you will. So, you know, I was talking to Betsy earlier, and I have a school that has asbestos in it, and they're trying to figure out how to get money to get it out. And, you know, I don't know the extent of, you know, what they've got in there, but it isn't gonna be cheap. And I would have to venture to guess, you know, when all is said and done, 350 may not be enough. So, you know, that's what that is, right? So a lot of my groups, they do need a year of planning. They do need to get things in a position where if they did get the larger sum of money, they can, you know, hit the ground running. But yeah, so I wish you would have kind of went into what those tiers look like, but we'll have it all on our website. You can talk to me and we'll go over it together. So yeah, did that answer your question? Anybody else?
Yeah, or add to the conversation. Yeah.
You knew that already.
I do. Okay, so thank you for coming.
Yes.
On day 2 of your job, I think, like we met at a Reimagining Rural Roadshow, in Miles City. And someone was like, oh, have you met the new TikTok? And I was like, no, but I've heard of this. So this EJ, so just kind of in my brain, the way I imagine it in my Brownfields world, these guys, if you can imagine, are kind of like the KSU tabs of the EJ world. Like EJ has its own silo and Brownfields has another silo. And it's my job as state Brownfields coordinator, as well as I'm on a national committee. I try to poke both of them enough that they start talking to one another. And the idea is to bring the EJ into our world. And to try to kind of bridge the gap, and because we have a phenomenal Brownfields community here in Montana that the KSU tabs are well aware of, which is why they keep sponsoring us. And we want to bring these guys into the fold. And if we can bring these guys as well as the grant makers into the fold, into this Brownfields community, I mean, I think it just makes a ton of sense. And so these guys are kind of doing the tab KSU side of things, whereas the grant makers are kind of like a TBA, for lack of a better terms. Like it's a service request. It's like, hey, I want to do this project, and they bring the money, which is kind of, it's almost something I think we've all been dreaming of, and never really expected, but all of a sudden, poof, out of nowhere, it just happened. And so it's kind of, it will be one of my things is on my to-do list, besides helping Paul with the new legislation, is figuring this out and trying to be the conduit for disseminating information to you guys, and not you guys, please contact her directly. But also it's gonna be my role to kind of mine what these guys are doing, and mine what grant makers are doing, and how we can kind of take this opportunity and take advantage of it. So, no, really, really looking forward to this. Yeah.
Yes, it'll hold.
Okay, great. All right, yeah, thank you. So how's everybody feeling? People have ate those burritos were very delicious, but very filling. So, we are in the home stretch now. We have one more presentation, kind of a train the trainer type session that we'll wrap up today. But before we get there, I just wanted to open it up for any final thoughts, comments by any of our previous speakers, to leave you beautiful folks with, or if any of the attendees here in person or virtually have any questions for any of the topics covered in the last day and a half. And you don't make anything now, that's cool. You can always reach out to any of us. And then I will do one more shameless plug of the evaluations. They are really valuable, helpful to us. We incorporate all feedback, good, bad, ugly, that we receive from all the events that we do into future programming. That really helps us. We also keep track of it over time and use it when we have to go reapply for TAB grants and TAB funding. It's really valuable to show what you all like, what works well, what doesn't, and things like that. So, okay, with that, I am very happy to introduce our next speaker, Katie C. She is with the Mid-Atlantic TAB program out of West Virginia University. And as Jason mentioned earlier, they have what they call the Bad Buildings program. And we actually had a presentation about the Bad Building program 2 years ago when we did our workshop in Great Falls. And there seemed to be a lot of interest in Montana communities about, oh gosh, how can we bring this to Montana? Could we do something like this, something similar? And then at a Swallow conference in August, Jason, Carrie, Staten with West Virginia and I were chatting, and I'm like, yes, let's incorporate it to the Montana workshop. So yeah, Katie's gonna come up, walk through a presentation. There's exercises you guys get to work on. All of the resources that she will be going over are available on our webpage. They're uploaded. And we have a handout for the in-person folks that we'll pass around. So you'll be able to access all this information, you know, going forward. And then for you folks that are online, we will put links in the chat so you can access all the resources as well and follow along.
Sorry, I'm up here
So,
throwing choice words around.
okay, so with that, please welcome Casey. Thanks, Maggie.
All right, so we have the PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, I'll just have you stand up there just so I can make sure the framing is good for the camera.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie C. Yeah, okay. All right, so I am with, we kind of have an identity crisis we discuss on a regular basis. So there was discussion earlier about a state brownfield program, and that's actually the origin of our program. So the state of West Virginia started that in 2005, and there are 2 brownfield assistance centers in the state of West Virginia. One at Marshall University and one at West Virginia University, and that's where I am based. And so we've been providing technical assistance to the state of West Virginia since 2006. But in 2021, we became the TAB provider for EPA Region 3. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing only in West Virginia, we now have the ability to do outside of the state. My background is in city planning. So I have spent my career as a city and county planner in West Virginia, the Carolinas, and Florida. I'm from West Virginia, so it's given me a great perspective, you know, along the East Coast. But my passion has always been with the environmental work, and so that's why I'm very excited about the Brownfield program. Sorry, I don't want to overwork you. All right, so. One of the programs that we have as the Brownfield Assistance Center in West Virginia is called the Bad Buildings Program. So this lets you know, BAD stands for Brownfield, Abandoned, and Dilapidated Buildings. So this was created in response to a lot of dilapidated buildings throughout the state of West Virginia, and trying to get the communities to understand the scope and the challenges that those buildings pose for the communities. And so, we've worked with the West Virginia DEP, and now we've also worked with the, Virginia DEQ, as well as the Kentucky Environmental State Agency, to try to train them to do this as well. This slideshow was started, based on one that we do for communities. But if you notice the symbol of the little dilapidated house, that indicates that that is for the train-the-trainer purposes. So it's content that is geared more toward those who would be actually, conducting the program. So again, just an overview that lets you know what BAD stands for. And it focuses on providing technical assistance to help communities recognize and identify those dilapidated buildings, possible brownfield sites, and start to take steps to understand what they can do to clean them up. I also wanted to let you know, I don't think this is going to take 3 hours at all. So I know I'm standing in between everyone and dinner and happy hour, and I'm with you there. So I just wanted to give you that slide there. Again, a reminder for what BAD stands for. Certainly brownfield, we've had a lot of discussion today, reminders about what that is. Abandoned and also dilapidated, and that focuses a lot more on residential uses. So again, it's a statewide program we work with the communities. We reach out to them to let them know that it's a service and assistance that's available to them. If they are interested, we certainly don't impose ourselves on them, but we let them know, and I'll go further into that about how we actually make that connection. And so then again, it helps them to actually create that inventory, because certainly in the brownfield world, we talk a lot about it all starts with an inventory, right? Understanding where your brownfield sites are, how many you have, and starting to understand how that could set you up for possibilities for additional funding to actually take care of them. And that includes prioritizing so that you can redevelop those sites. And we always stress that the inventory is a living document. It will never be completed, because you will always have sites coming onto the list, and then you will have some that go off of the list. So one of the things we like to point out to communities, that we have to point out, is so the BAD Buildings program is a technical assistance and inventory support program. It is a capacity building program, just as we've also heard in the presentations prior to mine. It's a major struggle for the communities throughout the state of West Virginia, and a lot of our communities throughout EPA Region 3 don't have the staff, and they are just stretched thin. And it's also a community engagement driven process. We believe that the community should have the buy-in to be able to recognize what the issues are and help them be the champions for turning that around. And it's free. All the assistance we provide is always free. What it is not is it's not a grant program or funding. Certainly some people, think that we're coming in and we're going to provide assistance, but no, the truth is of course we would love to be able to offer that, but hopefully we can connect them with our TIC-TAC or some other programs like that. And it is an independent process. So we do rely on community engagement and input, because it is their community and they are the ones who know it best. So some of the key principles here, again, it includes a variety of community stakeholders. Everyone from local officials to business owners to representatives from local community organizations. Those should be a part of the process. It's engaged with the local municipal government. We actually, at the meetings, when we have someone reach out to us and we have that initial meeting, we ask what their relationship is with their municipal government. And I understand that there could be some interest from the county level. We've dealt with that too, and I'll get into that later too. But that's a really important process, because starting to take those next steps for code enforcement is really important. So if they don't have a relationship or they don't have them on board, they need to understand they need to get them on board. And then the BAD Buildings program also involves teamwork. So, just with the surveys that, were being handed out, you can start to understand the process so that it's a team effort, and broken up into small teams to actually go through and conduct the inventory in your community. The teams work together to determine which sites are on the inventory. Actually, that's probably been determined at the bigger picture level. But the smaller teams then work through the criteria and actually stage the building for the list. And then the stakeholders determine the priority criteria. So first you conduct the inventory. And after that process has been done, then you start to identify what your priorities are going to be. So you can go through the process and that sets you up for the next phase. So here's an example of the model that we show communities. That of course, you start first with forming your bad buildings team. And so that is, there's actually a core team and then there's a bigger team. Your core team is who you're going to be communicating with on a regular basis. You don't need all the chefs in the kitchen because that can be too much, right? But you want the small team who's going to be working together with everyone from start to finish and who's going to be rallying the troops. So you're going to, again, start with forming a team, then you're going to train the team, which you're going to learn a little bit more about today, and actually developing the building inventory through on-the-ground inventory process, creating a final report, which is what our staff does. And we do that in coordination with the community. And then you can start to implement those priorities and objectives. So a little bit about the model. Why community engagement? Well, we've already, again, discussed it a little bit more today, and we believe this very much, that it's very important for a lot of reasons. First, as we say, many hands make for light work. And when you get a diverse set of ideas and resources, you can start to build on the knowledge of those on your team that you're just not familiar with, right? My set of expertise is different from those who are going to be on my team. Learning and sharing the history of the sites. When you're actually on the ground and doing the inventory, conducting that, looking at the sites, it's really helpful to have those in your community who know a little bit about the area and the sites that, especially us coming into the community, even in the state of West Virginia, we're not the experts for each individual community in the area, but that community is. And also this establishes trust. We certainly have so many coal-impacted communities throughout the state of West Virginia. And, you know, a lot of folks who believe that coal is not, you know, is not the dying industry that the majority of us do believe, you know, is a struggle, right? I don't want to get into the semantics of that, but just again, recognizing that it's not what it once was, right? So how can we help that community figure out how to grow and thrive despite the decline in the coal industry? So again, just having the different levels of input to help with that, with again, input and trust throughout the whole process. Do we need local government buy-in? Yes, this is critical. Because if you want to be able to actually take the next steps, and we've said this to communities before, you gotta have municipal input and buy-in, because when you're actually looking to how can we motivate property owners to fix up their properties, sell them, take steps to clean them up and redevelop them, you're gonna need the municipality to be on board with that, because sometimes you're gonna need those incentives. And then how can we adapt the model to fit time or capacity constraints? So, you know, one thing, and it's actually worked out pretty well too with rural communities, virtual options have been really helpful. Thankfully, it hasn't been a deterrent. Sometimes we are able to have meetings from our office, and those in the community are able to maybe group together sometimes. You know, if someone doesn't feel quite as strong with technology, they can get together and call in for the meeting. So that has not been a deterrent. A lot of our processes, or as we go through the process, we have in-person meetings and some could be virtual. So it's nice that there can be a mix But when it comes to the actual inventory process, that does need to be in person. So I feel a little bit like an imposter because there's a guy on our team, Seth, who's done a very good job at kind of helping us flesh this out because I'm a planner and I like the big picture and I like for everyone else to know what the process is. So he's helped me map out the process and, you know, we'd love to see this process happen in 6 months if that works for the community and your team, right? We recognize that, you know, there are time constraints and there are always other things that come up on your plate. We were just busy with the Brownfield grant application review process, for example. So to give you an idea of kind of mapping out the process and what we like to let the community know, would be the opportunity would be to start with the initial contact. So you could identify who you're going to actually be speaking with, start to discuss the schedule, and then start to work on a possible inventory day. Before the inventory day actually comes, so you can see when we bump up to month 1, externally, you're going to have to work on training and actually going through the inventory day. And so you might need more than 1 day, depending on if a neighborhood is, if the community is looking to do 1 or more neighborhoods. And internally, so our team is working on preparing data, because when you actually conduct the inventory site, Jason provided me with some information of some buildings in Helena that we can go through a little bit later today, but that's information that you look at ahead of time, you map it so that everyone's on board and knows the key area that you're starting to look for, and that's what you'll actually be boots on the ground for. Then after you've actually had the inventory day, then you're going to look into actually analyzing the survey results. Were they residential in nature? Were they commercial, industrial? Are they vacant? Is it a vacant lot, I should say? Side note here, we had communities ask us if we can add buildings that are not vacant in the list. Well, the easiest answer is keep them at vacant structures, but that would be a community decision to see if they would actually want to look at buildings that are not vacant, because we would certainly have to handle that in a very different manner, right? Definitely, you know, the optics are important in how you handle that, because you certainly don't want anyone to think that you're looking to throw them out of their house. So, you know, that's certainly a separate conversation to have, and we better advocate for coming on strong like that. And then you actually meet with the core team to start to prioritize the site. So when you see that list, you can see where they are, start to understand what shape they are in. Are they in poor shape? Are they in good shape? Should it be demolished? That's some of the data that you're looking into. And then you're going to have your prioritization meeting, which is the second community session meeting. And that's when you're going to finalize the prioritization grid, and that's some of the resources and handouts that Maggie is going to be providing to you. And so then we get into month 4 and 5, and so the building staff develops a report and recommendations. So that is what our team does a lot of work on, and I again have some more information to show you about that. One of the handouts that we have is showing you a draft report that we've actually just finished for a community in Virginia. But it involves data, background insights, the breakdown of the inventory that actually happened, and then conclusions and next steps. And so then, again, we're projecting that this could be at month 5 and 6, you would actually present this information to the community. And that would be actually presenting the final report. And then beyond that, we want them to know that just because a community has gone through the bad buildings program with us, that's not the end of our relationship, because again, we are technical assistants. That's our job. Again, sites come on all the time and sites move off. And you know, we're always trying to make ourselves available to let them know what those resources are. I know this feels like a lot. If you have any questions or need a pause or stretch break, or just take one. So some things to think about. So when you're looking at your internal team, So that is gonna be with your bad building staff and your core team. Again, the smaller team, you wanna think about how to establish this context. So I remember Jason had asked the question saying if there are some county or regional organizations out here, how might you go about reaching out to communities to let them know about this? We did this combination up here where we held a webinar a few months ago to let the southern part of the state, which is those that are most coal impacted, let them know about the program. So had a webinar, it was actually very well attended. Somehow the social media outreach and promotion was able to help get the attendance for that webinar to be very well attended. And we ran over the process with about the bad buildings program, and we had an interest form. So those who attended could fill out an interest form to say, hey, this sounds like something that would be interesting for our community to do. And then they actually reached out to us, and then we have started to follow up. It can seem like a lot to hold a webinar for us. We focused on 21 counties in the state of West Virginia. And you think, oh gosh, what if everyone or all the municipalities in those 21 counties responds? Well, they don't. And even for those who do, there's still that other factor that filters into maybe they just want to learn a little bit more about it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have all these communities wanting to go through the process at the same time. So for us, that's how we work on that. And again, right now, we're also working through the process at the county level too. Traditionally, this has always been at the municipality level, because again, more often than not, those are the ones who have code enforcement. But there are some relationships, right, where the counties actually may handle code enforcement for the municipalities. So there's an opportunity to talk about that and still understand how a county can take this on and start to prioritize areas within the county. So, you know, kind of doing things in a reasonable chunk is something to consider for this. Again, yes, talking about the baselines for communication, the enforcement mechanism for the structures, and the local government buy-in is crucial. So in where I first started my job as a planner in the community, it was in the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia, they recognized that they had a vacant structure issue. And so they actually created a vacant structure ordinance. And so it was kind of a two-phased approach. And so it was, one was if the building was actually vacant, and one was if it was not. And so it went through this process where they actually communicated and reached out to the property owners. And if the property owners would respond back, then they could, the city could talk to them to say, hey, you know, this is an issue. We'd really like to see you clean up your building, you know, bring it back and make it an active site, or maybe it just needs to be demolished, or in some situations, we would actually have to put a lien on it. So again, that's why that's important to think about that, and that could be one of the recommendations that comes in the final report. And then we say establish a steady pace. Again, I showed a 6-month process. That's my whole career has been in government, so I'm used to slow and steady. And so, but I recognize that, but anytime we can try to, again, make it seem like this process is not going to take an eternity, let's try to do that and work with the community to work within their time constraints. So again, core group should be about 3 to 5 people and keep in touch throughout the whole process. And then again, the goal is to keep the momentum building, make sure these steps are being taken, and continue to communicate, because it's very easy for projects, we all know it, very easy for projects to fall off our radar as we get busy. So again, this is kind of the internal process for the core team. Then we talk about the external process for the stakeholders and the community members. So you have a diverse array of stakeholders, and that's who you want to make sure you get, because a lot of times we actually had a conversation with someone wearing our tab hat, and they didn't want to include a big variety of stakeholders because they just didn't want to deal with, opposition. But the way we see that is our opinion on that was, well, let's bring them into the fold earlier on, right? So that you can start to understand those differences and work through them and find that common ground. So it's always encouraged to do that. When you have your survey team, break those into groups of 2 or 3 or 3 to 4. And there's going to be one lead person who is going to operate Regrid, which is the survey tool that we use, and that can be done on your phone. You don't need everyone on your team to actually, and can't have each person on the team entering that, because you just want one inventory per group done, because the groups are each in charge of a certain sector of your target area. Anyone can join the process. Doesn't matter if folks don't have to be there from the beginning to the end. We understand everybody has real life and things come up all the time. That's okay. We just want to be welcoming and encourage anyone to participate at any point. And then when you conduct these inventories, they are windshield surveys. No trespassing, nothing shady. You don't want to get in trouble. So again, it's just taking a look at what you can see. Okay. So,
Does anybody have any questions?
I know, a lot. We talked about a little bit about how to handle this to make this a little interactive for the inventory process. We even thought about going outside. You're welcome. We did not. It's very cold out. So, we do have 5 properties, actually, that were included. So there will be just a very quick, PowerPoint presentation after this that shows those 5 sites here in Helena. I first started with photos from Google that Jason showed me, but yesterday I actually went out and took the photos to the best of my ability to kind of replicate the photos that you would do when you're actually in the field conducting that inventory. So I know, again, this is a little bit dry right now. I promise it's going to get a little more relatable as we get into actually seeing a site that you may have driven by, actually. So, when you're looking at getting it started, you're going to hold a training session. Again, you're kind of getting a little bit of that. When it comes to the training session, I should start when a community reaches out to us. The person on our team who's kind of taken the lead on this took the liberty to put together about 9 slides. So when we have that initial meeting, and it's a virtual call, introduce ourselves, give a little bit of information about the program, and just kind of let them know the process. So they've seen that presentation, and then we let them know that we need to start talking about the timeline, right? When could potential inventory days be? And then we start to set that inventory day, knowing that someone from our office needs to go attend, because that does need to be in person. But before you can actually get started with that, we also do work with a contact in their community to actually get some information on the site. So again, or on the community. So we want to start to identify and map the area that you actually want to look into. And then you'll break that down into little sectors so that there's a team that's responsible for a certain sector. So when you get into inventory day, you're gonna have a sign-in sheet, you're gonna welcome everyone, thank you for attending. Snacks are always encouraged. I am known on my team as the one who's always looking for the next meal. So again, always look for a way to add some snacks. And then a brief presentation. So again, some of the content we have for you after this is going to include some sample slides, provide the overview with Regrid. So Regrid is the site that we use. You are welcome to use certainly any site that you are comfortable with. It is a site that we pay for, but we have unlimited members that we can share it with. And so that's what's made it so helpful for our state. And we've also been doing it outside of the state as well. But it's a good site because it pulls in a lot of other information. It's pulling in data from the assessor. It's got some information about the history of the site. Sometimes it has information about the size of the building. And so prior to the actual inventory day, what we're doing is we've identified someone on a team who's going to be able to, who's going to be tasked with actually conducting the survey and being on their phone and clicking through the process. So we want to make sure that we've sent that to them ahead of time so they can log in and make sure that that's not a problem, because sometimes you're going to get into an area and your cell phone service may be a little bit limited, which is why these surveys that were handed out may be the backstop that you need to go for too. So again, you may identify your your team leader again, who will actually enter into regrid, but then you can establish the teams and determine which team focuses in which area. Again, this is a possible agenda that we're seeing. So again, after you've gone through this process, you can have lunch, depending on the time of day, go through the actual inventory process, then come back and regroup. Were there any issues and concerns? Do you have more work to do? So does there need to be a second day for a follow-up inventory? And then also start to discuss those next steps and answer questions. I'm trying to think. Yeah, so we also recommend, I know when it comes to thinking about community engagement, if you're talking about a project, a community project that's happening, a lot of times we look to do something in the evening to be able to accommodate those who are working and may not get off of work. But when it comes to something like this, unfortunately, we have found that it does seem to work best during the day, whether that's in the morning or the afternoon, just because of needing the daylight, right? Now it's definitely a challenge with the shorter day. The cold weather, you know, as long as it's not snowing or raining, isn't so much an issue. So when we talk about months, again, this is a suggested timeline. But when you look at months 2 and 3 on the timeline, the bad building staff is going to be analyzing the data and work on the classifications. So when you've gone through the inventory process, so when you're in the field and you and your team are chatting, whether that's 2 of you or 3 of you, you want to look at this site, say the St. John's building. Yeah, that's one. Take a look at that, and you as a team are going to say, hey, do we think this building is in good shape, fair shape, poor shape, or should it be demolished? And here's the criteria that we want everyone to review. It shouldn't be too subjective, right? You know, you don't want to be recommending it should be demolished. It's actually not in that bad shape based on the outside. So again, that's the field work that you're doing, actually the day of, and then our team goes back into regrid, because we look online, and then we can just make sure there were no errors or issues, and then that's what we can start to talk about and pull the data to determine how many of those sites were considered in these classifications. So now you start to move toward the prioritization. And it's what we consider a second full community session. You probably could hold this virtually, but we have been doing it in person. It seems to be the level of comfort for both our team and the communities. And so they're asked to establish 3 to 5 priorities prior to the session, prior to this prioritization session. Some of those things we think about are visibility of the property. Are they a brownfield? Are there health and safety hazards? And is it in a flood zone? So those are some of the priorities they're going to go through, and that will help with the end list. And so again, because it is a living inventory, it is a cyclical process. And so again, we do recommend that they start with report or should be demolished sites so that they can understand. Certainly those are most likely the ones that are health and safety hazards. And once we teach them how to hold a community prioritization process, the thought is the community can then go out and do this later. So if they need to reevaluate, or if so many more have come onto the list after a certain number of years, we hope that we have trained them to be able to go through this process when they're ready. All right, so ranking the criteria in the grid, you're going to get that as a handout. Should be see on the grid that you're going to get, so it should be pretty self-explanatory. And again, you're going to go through the process. So the properties are ranked 1 to 3 in each priority. So 1 is a low priority and 3 is a high priority. And so, for example, if the priority is visibility, if it's close to a main highway, or it's downtown, you would rank it as 3. If it's standalone and not readily available, this is where we determine at that meeting, you would call that a number 1. Then you rank them, and the higher the total, the higher their priority of the building. And this is where, through this process, again, you've got the core team and you've got the stakeholders. You want this to be a good, engaging conversation. So you want a lot of conversation because, again, we hope that those who are attending and going through this process feel heard and seen. And so, again, that they're bringing information to the table that maybe you wouldn't have thought of. And why? So prioritization helps do 2 things. It helps to identify the goals for the community, and then it also makes it seem like a more manageable task. And so this can also help identify potential target areas. So one thing we like to think about, if I put my brownfield hat on, is, again, we talk about having an inventory of sites and thinking about if they want to look to apply for an EPA brownfield assessment grant for, at this point, we could say next year, right? Once you've actually identified this area, if a community goes through this process and you've actually mapped it out, then you can say, I hadn't really thought about that. These are actually clustered in this area, or it's maybe along a corridor. Also, the first community I worked with, that's also where I learned more about brownfields, but it was 2 adjacent cities. And so they shared brownfield sites, and again, it was along a road that went from the one community up to the other. And so together, they worked through this process, and over the years, they've actually been able to clean up and redevelop brownfield sites. But again, going through the process and mapping it out and then creating promotional materials is actually something that can help the community take on those next steps. All right, I think I need a stretch. So, okay. Trying to think. So, why do we survey? Again, data collection, property classification, property prioritization, and determining the next steps. Again, survey, these are windshield surveys. You notice again, this is there's no little dilapidated building on here. So this is the type of slide that we would show the community prior to the process. So again, we let them know about the number of teeth, don't trespass, and if you happen to run into someone when you're taking pictures and taking a look at the site, give a polite answer and say, hey, we're just, trying to look at the number of abandoned buildings and see what we can do to help clean them up. You want to be honest and polite, because this has happened. So again, when it actually comes to going through the inventory process, we use regrid. Again, you can use something else. We do find that we verify, right? So regrid has a lot of helpful information. It talks about, it provides ownership, the footprints, building, the boundaries for the property, but also if you have a community and they have really good GIS software, it's a great idea to compare with that. So if you notice any discrepancies, some communities don't have such good resources, and some of them do have really good GIS resources. So it's always a good idea to verify with that. So again, some of those, what you can use would be GIS, and then for the county, and then our team uses GIS. When it comes to bad buildings, we can and do include residential sites. We make that known from the beginning. Okay, all right, core team, do you want to include non-residential buildings, or do you want only residential, or do you want to mix? So that's something to determine when you get out of the gate. So again, there's the property types that you would consider. And then also when you consider the condition of the structure, it's going to be, are they major, minor, or no problems? So you're going to be looking at the building frame, chimney, gutters, windows, porch, overhang. Nobody needs to be an expert on this. I don't want you to think that we expect you to be experts on this. I gave a few examples when we get to that slide later, a couple of the sites here, because they're really obvious. That's, that will jump out at you. So for the most part, we only do vacant structures. Again, if the community decides that they also want to look at buildings that they don't believe are vacant, that's okay. You just need to work through the process of, again, how to address that, because if you're talking about sites that someone is actively living in, you know, just like, property owners, some get very, touchy and don't want their buildings to be referred to as a brownfield. They certainly don't, you know, you certainly want to be very careful about talking about, a house that someone is living in. I live in a college town. I know what it was like to have, a lot of landlords have buildings that are not great, but we would not go outright and, you know, blast, you know, that property owner in that way, or make anyone feel less than, right? Because that's what the landlord is leading the condition of the building is. Also talking about major versus minor when it comes to actually the conditions. And you need to be sure that you come up with a consensus when you're surveying the structure. So again, because one person on the team is entering the work into regrid on the phone, you want to have that collective buy-in before they actually enter it into the phone. Yeah, just one survey per structure. Let's see, and we also, so the structure includes multiple parcels. We still say you only survey one. And so you can make a note of that as you're actually going through it. And enter in your notes when you're in the field, and always take a picture, because we can go back and make edits on the back end on the website. So always time for discussion on that, and always feel free to enter notes. All right. This is just detail about why we use regrid. Basically, it comes down to it's really user friendly. You can use it on the desktop or the app, which is what's really handy out in the field. So now we're getting into more visual aids, which is good. I'll wake you up a little bit. So this is actually zeroing in. The white box indicates where we are, where we dedicated the target area to be. So you can start out probably in the county, and then this is in, I'm trying to remember which community this is. I think it's Pound, Virginia, I think, or Narrows. But you can see that outline. Each means there were 4 sections that were actually inventoried, and that means there were 4 teams, 1 team per section. This is actually zooming in on one of the sections. So one team was responsible for inventory and inspection. Something's pretty manageable, right? And we are actually in regrid. This is giving you an example of what that looks like. So again, you're able to take a picture and upload that into the survey. When the survey has actually uploaded, it turns purple. First, it's outlined in yellow, then it's shaded purple so that you know you're good to go. And oh boy, this is it. So this is our team. This is again meant to be the kind of overall slide presentation. This was really dense and a lot. I think as we were preparing for it, I didn't really think about how dense that might be for you. So I'm going to switch gears here soon if you have any questions, but we're going to pull up regrid, but also I want to pull up the examples of 5 buildings in Helena. Again, I promise I'm not going to go through them at length. Again, I'm standing in between happy hours, so I'm mindful of that. So if you'll just bear with me, we're going to switch if that's okay.
So, do you want to drive? Do you want to move around this stuff, or you can hold your mic?
That's a good idea. Thank you so much.
Good.
Thank you. All right, she's helping me out here. So we prepared this in advance, and it makes much more sense because I think I stimulated Helena's economy very well on my own these last couple of days, so I'm more familiar with it. But if we zoom out, we can see that I chose Helena, right, to focus on. But the white area represents the area that actually includes the 5 properties that Jason submitted. So one of the properties was actually, hold on, sit this down. All right, Jason, I'm struggling. Oh, here we go. Okay. This is St. John's. Is that St. John's?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you so much. So, I don't know why there's no photo available here, but I am using Regrid to, once I'm on here, again, I can see that it is telling me that it's about 2.89 acres in size, that the building is about 126,000 acres, and that tells me the property owner information. So you can see that this shows a good bit of information. It also gives me information based on the 2024 tax year. So it actually pulls a lot of information, which is why it's such a helpful, it has become such a helpful tool for us. And again, we're not here to promote Regrid, we're just letting you know what works for us. So that is this one. Hold on. Okay, yeah. Oh, yes, thank you, so sorry. Regrid, thank you so much, sorry, Kate. Regrid is actually the tool that we use. So it's a website, again, that allows us the opportunity to make available for free to the communities that we have, because again, we're talking about rural communities, those communities with not a lot of capacity and certainly not a lot of resources. So we pay for Regrid, and through the account that we have, it actually allows us to allow them to use it for free. So that's really helpful, especially when it comes to communities who don't have access to a lot of online and GIS mapping. And it's certainly much more detailed than, say, using a Google map. So again, I get no kickbacks from promoting Regrid. It's just one that someone on our team found, and that's what we have used for a few years, and it is pretty user friendly. And so once I'm in Regrid, then over here, it allows me to determine, so I have, I've set up the project for Helena. And so once I'm in here, again, you can see that I can choose Helena from the breakdown, for example, and that's why I was able to choose the area where I want to focus, so that when I actually select Helena for this particular project, it's going to zoom me right into the area, and then I can zoom in further to actually look for the site. Do you know where the other presentation is? There was the, so it might be here.
The inventory?
Yes.
I just added it to your other one.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, there, thank you so much. So this is, I tried to think of a way to actually show this to you that's kind of easily digestible. And so this is again showing through the Regrid tool that we use. Again, could be any tool that you or your community wanted to use. And then the white area represents the part of Helena that we are focusing on. And then within that, one of the sites that was suggested to use is 45 South Rodney Street. So does anyone have the survey with them on the table? A hard copy survey, it's got in the top right corner, Bad Buildings logo. So I promise not going to go through this on all of them, but I thought if you as a table want to go through some of this, you could start to understand. There's actually a better example. So this is 45 South Rodney Street. And Jason, I was really surprised. So you gave me this link and I looked, of course, the first pictures I pulled were from Google Maps. And when I went yesterday, holy cow, the gray building adjacent to it, that is not there. So, you know, it's, you know, we get asked the question a lot, is it okay to use Google Street Map or another tool? Well, you can, but a lot can change from the time that photo was taken to what actually is represented on the ground right now. So when it comes to actually populating the information into Regrid, you would take photos, because again, that's the information that you want to go by. And so for this particular example, it was easiest to get to, from the front. So there's the front, and you can see a little bit of the side. Now, this was a trickier one. I was not able to see a lot of detail about the building. So I didn't zoom in on deteriorated sections, mostly because I saw some people milling about. And for the purpose of today, I just wanted to capture some detail. And the rear shot actually did come from Google Street View. So this is where, again, you'd be able to get closer, right? You could be up along the stone retaining wall, to take a look at that. You could see, does it look like there's paint peeling? Does it look like the windows are in bad shape, or starting to pop out? And does it look like it could be vacant? These are the things you're looking for. This one did not appear to be vacant to me. It did look like it was pretty well lived in, but that's okay. But for the purpose of actually going through the survey and then looking at regrid, I want to find one that has a more obvious example. This is another one. This is on, I think it's North Rodney Street. This is a garage. And these are photos taken from yesterday. So you can see straight on looking at the garage, you can see the side here. Again, I can see the retaining wall and a little bit of the side of the building, and then looking at the rear. So this is, I've walked up this alley and then I'm able to take a look at the building here. Again, you can certainly see, you know, the condition of the doors is not that great, but this one is still not jumping out as much. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely things that should be addressed here. But this is 312 Breckenridge Street. Also looks different than the Google Street View. They have recently painted. So the front door has this cool mural, whereas if you look at Google, it looks like a white garage door. So this is looking at the front, the side of the building, and then the rear. That shot actually did also come from Google. But if you zoom in close on this one, you can start to see some of the deterioration detail. So you can see some peeling paint on the right-hand side, and then you can see this on the left-hand side. It looks a little dented. I'm not quite sure what they're covering up here. So again, these are some of the examples that you start to look into, and that goes into the survey here. So I've given you a little bit of example, and okay. So I think this may be one. It's a little, the photos, again, don't zoom in too much, but start to take a look at your survey here. You can take a look at that. This is the St. John Former Hospital, right? So here's the front of it, there's the back of it. And so it's a really big building, certainly. You've got, because you see the front, you know, the front part of it here, and then there's the rear, but then there's the small part of the kind of office complex that's on the left-hand side there. So if we go back here to regrid, all right. So I think, so here is, again, the one for St. John's Hospital. So I'm trying to remember now how I go in, add a survey. So I'm going to add a survey. Again, typically this will be done on your phone in the app, but we're going to add a survey for this one. So I will show you also some more information for how you come up with the survey, but for this purpose, we've pre-populated it. And so what's the property type? Any answers? Commercial, excellent, thank you. So we'll put that information in there. Building frame and structure, would we say there are no problems, minor problems, or major problems? Minor. Oh, shoot, I just went back. Sorry. Roof, chimney, and gutters, no minor or major problems. They looked minor. I know, they looked minor. I'll give you a hint. It really looked like most of the issues that I could see on the outside seem to be around windows, most of them. I have a real gem for you here later to show you. Windows and doors, no problems, minor problems, or major problems. I think we can go with that. And then siding and paint. Yeah. All right, porch and entrance overhang. Yeah, really bad. Really wasn't one. Or not. Not to the extent of another one. This is where we could type in any notes. If you had any issues you want to make sure you take back to the group to discuss, or if there was something that actually wasn't very well reflected in these survey questions, now is a good time to enter that. And then in the actual survey, we make it mandatory to upload a photo. So for the purpose of doing this on the desktop, I don't have to do that. And also I just showed you some, but again, you want to do that. And then, okay. Okay, and now I'm going to submit the survey. So now she's watching to see if I'm going to get it. I can get it. All right, so yay. Okay, so I only took some close-ups. Again, they seem to be window shots for me. So what are some deterioration details? I'm sorry, it's cutting it off down here, but so this is not great, right? This is certainly an issue. And then if you look at the paint peeling here, this didn't look terrible. Could definitely use a coat of paint, but those are some of the things that are easier to see again on kind of a windshield survey. This is the gym. So this is 320 East Broadway Street. Let me pull this up real quick here. This is going to be a good one to go through.
Oh my gosh.
All right. So I'll pull this up here again. I jinxed myself, didn't I? No, there it is. All right. So this is 320 East Broadway Street, which is a house, which could definitely be done in the bad buildings program as residential. So it's located on a corner, so it has two fronts. Your, what I would call kind of your primary front is here, with these tall shrubs, the secondary front, and then you have the side here. And the gyms really happen here. Here's the side, so you can see this is completely exposed here. And there are a lot of pigeons in Helena, I have learned. There were a lot on this roof here. Some of them are making themselves a warm home here. So this window is busted out, so a lot of those are going in here. And again, you can see another angle here of this exposed area here where they can go up in through the rafters there. You can see the separation here. That's not good for weathering of the building. And then also, one of the things that we talk about, and it's covered in one of our handouts, is a building vacant. So when you're starting to take a look, this is a pretty good indicator. You know, the meters are not active here at all. And then a lot of the windows and the doors are boarded up. So we want to go in here and enter this as a survey. So again, this is 320 East Broadway. I'm going to add a survey. And this is a single family type. All right, would we say the building frame and structure has? It is. Thank you. Thank you. The meters, sorry. My burrito is putting me to sleep. Okay, all right. Building frame and structures, no problems, minor problems, major. I would agree. It's okay, nobody's gonna quiz you on this when you do it in your community. Roof, chimney, and gutters? Yes. Windows and doors? Major. Thanks, Kate. Siding and paint? In perspective, it doesn't seem as major as the other. We'll go with that. Porch and entrance overhang. who would know with the, the shrubs? That's true, that's true. If you had any notes, let's say,
So there's a fire. These fires.
boarded up, okay,
Fire.
excellent, good to know. See, and that is not very visible. So Jason just told us there was a fire here, so that would be a good thing to put in the notes, because that was not obvious to me. walking.
Why there's a cap.
Okay, got it.
And I guess I would like to add to that, maybe you can repeat this, but maybe this is why you do that, to engage the community and getting community members involved in the process.
Yes.
In those small 3 to
Yes.
5 groups,
Yes.
they know the history, they know the story, they may need something somebody else doesn't,
That's correct.
so that's really key.
Yes,
As
absolutely.
Jason is demonstrating, you didn't even know who's gonna be part of it. Great, push it.
That's right. For those of you watching at home, we just discussed how Jason was able to contribute information that I wouldn't have been able to see or know from my knowledge that a fire had actually happened in the structure. So that's really an important thing when I can't imagine then the impact that has when you get on the inside of that building. So, again, we would upload a photo and I'm gonna submit the survey. I think that's all that we had to show here in that slideshow. I think. Sorry. Yes, so that was the quick rundown I wanted to do for you to show your community. I need to get back to, I want to show, there's an actual manual that we've done and a regrid how to, that I'm not gonna go into great detail, but I figure you all might find it helpful. No, that should be uploaded, or would probably be here.
And it's good. It's on our website.
Okay,
I'm gonna go back and do another share.
I don't
okay,
think
thank you.
And then just go to,
How do you use regrid? I put it in the chat.
oh,
That was, and then the manual's on the website.
let's see, double share something, so.
And do you even know if, EPA funds could be used to purchase, regrid or something similar?
Where's Ed on meters?
I don't know, it is better.
It is, I wanna say this might be 3,000, 3,500 a year, I think.
I told it like it was a little higher, 8 to 12.
Carrie, our boss was looking, she said, I must have gotten it at a good deal because that particular time, what she was locked into was good.
Their prices on it, it's very good.
Yeah.
It's gonna be that and then. Actually, I would like to have that and then we'll have the. Sorry, and.
Oh.
So that's GIS for $100 to live their lifestyle. There's some good, the state of Montana has any kind of inventory for different states. I mean, as far as like the whole where everybody
There you go.
contributes to it, for their inventory, as far as community and what their priorities are, or.
We, no, right now, we're funnel everybody for EPA. Then,
Wanna start with the manual, or you're gonna start with the
Manual sounds great, thank you so much.
sorry, maybe, but it's hard. That data doesn't talk well GIS, so much, so it's okay, all funds, if you want, in one place. It's always been on the list, but, we'll see, it's always. That's another bit on which we are having that, how can we make our information more usable and really have this.
Well, EPA has something that we as grants, we use.
So, well, so when you enter data in it shows up on this, my community code. Everybody get questions, showing out well, yeah. I can show you what you have done. But when but where all those are 21 maybe. And so on the database, what is all EJ created on your and all of all.
And so for the folks online, the question was, does the state of Montana have like a brownfields inventory database? And the answer is no, but they do refer to the EPA database, Clean Up in My Communities. It's not really even an issue with that, but the Clean Up in My Communities, as Jason was just explaining, goes to, it's any data that is put into the acres database shows up Clean Up in My Community. So those are sites that have already been worked. Those are brownfield sites that have already been done, so they're considered brownfields. We get this question, I get this question all the time, no matter what state we're in, what community we're in, where can I go to find a list of brownfields in my site? And by one of the beauties of the brownfields program in general, and just what it is, there is no such database that could ever possibly maybe even exist, because you as a community define brownfields in your community. Because of the definition of brownfields and what they are. And this is just one way that you can identify sites that you can prioritize and target. But you could use this kind of methodology to create and establish your own brownfields inventory. I kind of wish there was, but there's just not, kind of by virtue of that. There are other tools and resources that you can tap into. There's one that we partnered with an organization a couple years ago called Peer. Platform for environmental environmental records. We have a link to it on our website. If you go to khtab.org e-tools, there's a direct link to Peer. And what Peer does, it pulls up information from the FRS database, Clean Up in My Communities, and the EPA Loss database. And you can put in a property address in your community or wherever, and it evaluates, kind of a risk tool, but evaluates the possibility or potential of contamination of a particular site based on what is known. So we've had some people do that to kind of help develop an inventory, so you can look at something like that. And yeah, there's other platforms out there, but there's not a single, oh, I'm gonna go here and identify all the brownfields ever. That just, it doesn't exist, so. Hopefully that's helpful. We have some other tools and resources that we can help you with if you do want to establish your own database inventory. Like we have the brownfields inventory tool that's free to use for anybody. That you can start building your own inventory in. It's password protected, so only you have access to the data. It does have a mapping feature, so you can start mapping your own, brownfields in your community. It has exports features. We're currently got an Exchange Network grant that we're in the process of developing. They're called APIs, but that's very techy. But essentially, ways for BIT to communicate with other federal databases, so you can start kind of enhancing your own inventory. So if you have any questions about that, or want to know more about inventorying in general, using BIT or other resources, reach out to Kate or I'm happy to talk more about that. So hopefully that's helpful in this context.
Thanks, Maggie. So one of the reasons we have the bad buildings model, again, is to help those communities with low capacity, no capacity, and also limited resources. So I would say that when we wear our tab hat, like Maggie does, and we can also offer what we call our inventory support program for some other communities that may have some more capacity and resources, we can the way we handle that is to go to the community and help them also go through the inventory process with small teams, but we don't end up preparing a report. The truth is, preparing a report is a lot of work, but, so that's why we don't offer it, you know, throughout all of Region 3. It is truly a West Virginia program. That's where we get some funding to actually conduct that program. But there is a lot of value in actually going through the inventory process in the hopes of, again, being able to consider applying for an EPA assessment grant to help go through do some planning work, right, for an area where you've got that concentration of brownfield sites, or actually go through the assessment sites. So again, we also kind of distinguish and differentiate from that in the different capacities, to use that word again, of our roles. And so we've put together this manual, and I was hoping, thank you so much, thank you. I was hoping that it would be finished for today, but the truth is, when we revamped it a little bit for today, and then brought our boss in, she said, oh boy, we should really make sure we sit down and talk through it all. In terms of, we want to make sure the language we use is consistent. We don't want to be confusing because, just trying to figure out who's our audience. Is it folks we're trying to train? Is it the communities themselves? So I'm not going to go into great detail about this. But this is just to, again, help folks understand. Here's the background of the bad buildings process. The phases of it all. Again, you already saw this: form the team, train the team, develop your inventory, create a report. A little bit about the background. How did we actually establish our bad buildings program? And it was back in 2013. Commonly used terms. We have someone on our team who's big into acronyms. When we start using them too often, they'll nudge us to make sure that we're explaining those to those who don't use it on a daily basis, like ourselves. This talks about why address them. I think based on the earlier panel that happened earlier, of course, health and safety hazards, decreased property values, and reduced tax revenue, and slowed economic growth could be very helpful to when you start working with the legislature. So these are things we like to point out. Just some more information again about getting your stakeholders involved. So our hope is that you all will take away from this with hopefully the slideshow and this manual. There's also a regrid how-to that I can click over to later. And I hope that this will be helpful for you all. Maggie, I will let you all know when we do have this manual in what we call our final form, but I mean, the content is pretty good to go here. And this is also talking about the timeline, and then we broke it down in terms of what's the external perspective and what's the internal perspective. So what's our team working on, and where are we when it comes to the community? So that's how we put that down there. Again, breaking down who's the core team, who's the survey team. We provided screenshots of regrid. In hindsight, probably would have been helpful for you all when it's hard to figure out when I'm presenting to you, right? Which would have made more sense to explain regrid a little bit or to start with the presentation as I did. We provide some screenshots so that gives some more context. Talking about the inventory day, again, this is kind of a draft agenda. You can model according to what best suits your needs and what is going to work with the community. Materials, these are, some of these come from lessons learned. My boss always travels with flip chart, and it came in handy because at one of the meetings they thought they would have a projector and there was some miscommunication. So back to the flip charts they went. Again, talking about what's the type of structure, what's the condition of it. Other things to think about, self-service. That's why you may want to have paper inventory, just in case that could be an issue. Minor versus major conditions. Talking about the actual condition. Is it a major problem all the way down to, so is it good or should it be demolished? This is the inventory. So this is all this goes through the process that eventually turns into the final product that is a final report. I don't have that one pulled up, but maybe that would be helpful to show you, but, and this is the prioritization. So one of the things to think about is when we talk about the overall community goals, we did talk about prioritization criteria to think about. But one of the things to think about first is what are the goals of the community? And it's going to be different from community to community. Some examples of that can include brownfield properties, uncooperative property owners, a lack of code enforcement, visibility of vacant or dilapidated properties, the concentration of vacant or dilapidated properties, and also opportunities for economic development. So that's a question to have the community say, what are the challenges our community is facing? A second question is, what type of change do I want to make in my community? A third could be, what do people notice the most when visiting our community? And then how can we make our community more attractive to business development? And what can we do to keep our current residents? One of the things we think about often is, I think my perspective when it comes to personal perspective when it comes to brownfield redevelopment is, I think it's the right thing to do for the environment. But I recognize that when I'm talking to other audiences, or maybe I'm talking to elected officials, I'm probably going to need to take the avenue of saying, hey, how can we make ourselves more attractive for business development? And so then that's when you can talk about actually identifying those brownfields, having an idea of what the contaminants are, understanding what you need to do to clean them up, and then actually getting the money to clean them up so that they can then become active in the community, active sites, whether that means demolishing them to get the site ready or cleaning them up to be fixed up. Here's that grid I was referencing. Just the separate grid is going to be included in the resources that KSU is going to provide you with. That helps you go through the ranking of it. So you can see the number on the left-hand side, so it's a little bit grainy, but that talks about the property address. And for this particular community, again, this is the priorities they talked about: health and safety, visibility, cooperative property owner. You can change them to meet the needs of your community. And then the final report. This is a general layout or breakdown of the contents that we have been doing in ours, where you talk about an introduction of the Bad Buildings program, local information and demographics. We've been talking about websites and information and EJ information. It is hard for small communities to understand where to pull all that information. The Bad Buildings program is really helpful for them to understand how they can pull that data, where they can pull the data from, and what it can be used for. So what our hope is that they can pull this information that we worked through with them and take this, and they get this in a digital format, and then they can take it and apply for additional funding. So they can apply for brownfield funding, they can apply for other sources of funding. And, you know, if you want to focus on EJ issues, is it in a floodplain, things like that, that's data that's available, that's pretty fresh, and should be good for them to help them, again, go through that application. Because, you know, some of these things we don't quite think about how that can be a challenge for communities to be able to identify and actually take that data and demonstrate why they have such a need for the funding they are requesting. So that's one of the valuable things that we believe comes out of the report. We talk about the Bad Buildings methodology. Nice thing is number 1 and 2 is going to stay the same, right? Once we've done this once, we're just going to plug and play it into this for the community. Survey results and analysis are going to change, and also the recommendations. If it came to be that there were a lot of sites that were brownfield, they were industrial in nature, it would be easy to say, our recommendation is that you consider applying for an EPA assessment grant or a cleanup grant, right? If we recognize that they had actual assessment work done. So that's nice that can be one of the things they think about. One of the communities that we recently went to actually is so much of the area that they prioritized and surveyed is in the floodplain. So that's a major issue when it comes to actually redeveloping the area. And that's gonna be a hard one for them to work on, but trying to understand how can we redevelop our community and make this a priority and recognize the limitations we have with being in the flood zone. So there's some extra steps that they need to take. Also, brownfield resources, that can stay the same, and appendix. So the nice thing is, once we've gone through this and you set it up the first time, some of these things can stay the same, and then of course you're just updating, some of these numbers to actually fit the results of the survey and the prioritization. And then this says, what happens after you go through the bad buildings program? The answer is, well, you got a nice report and we are here to help. So again, it's not, see you later. It's, here's your report. We had a, good experience working for you. Hopefully that's the case. And then we let them know that we are available to help them throughout their journey. One thing we always try to do also, whether that's in West Virginia or as TAB, is to say, I don't know the answer, but let me put you in touch with someone who does know the answer. So hopefully, the TIC-TAC or grant makers, things like that would be good resources to put them in touch with. Our contact information, and here we get into the appendix resources. Here's an example of a flyer. Sometimes these are things that communities can really need the help with. Where I think it was Sarah earlier, I think she's left, said Canva, we love Canva. But underestimating how just preparing things like that can be so helpful for our communities. So we just include examples like that for them. How to have a conversation with the property owners. We've all got them. We've all got the property owners who have let those properties sit there for years and showed no interest. So, there's no silver bullet. We don't have it either, but here's some suggestions and thoughts for how to have those conversations. This is a handout. We have it, I believe, on our website, but it's a 2-page handout. So if we have someone who's expressed an interest in it, we can provide this with them. It's front and back. Again, highlights some of the content that actually came from earlier in the manual. General timeline. Here's the survey that you all were referencing, so we include that. Priority examples. This is what we call a friendly letter template. When I used to be a city planner and had to help with property maintenance or zoning, we would call them nastygrams. You don't want to call them that. We call these friendly letter templates that we believe should come from your constituents and those in the community rather than the government. Because we want them to help put pressure on the property owners who are not involved and not showing an interest. So we also have some notes which will be shared as well for some suggestions for, again, how to have the friendly letter go out. And again, who it should go out from, again, because it can be off-putting to come from a government official. So just trying to let you know some of the lessons learned from us along the way. Again, it's not a silver bullet, but anytime we can try to share some things that have worked in the past, that's what we've intended to do. I think that's all. Then we flipped to yes.
I'm just curious, the responses that people have gotten to those friendly letters.
That is a good question, Kate. I didn't think to ask that question. I'm not sure. I do know that when we say to the stakeholders, hey, we really are relying on you to have this conversation, it helps a little bit. Doesn't always move them quickly, but it does sometimes open that door for conversation. I need to follow up on that, and I apologize, I don't know that answer to that, but there are just some things that we can all say, right, if I'm not wearing my hat in an official capacity and I can talk to someone and say, what the hell, man? Why are you just sitting on this? And it's sometimes a little bit easier to be frank like that. It's a good question. Sorry, I don't know the answer. But I can tell you that it's not that we included in here because it has been motivating enough, put it that way. Also, who Seth on our team has done a great job trying to again, work on refining this process, put this together literally last week. It came to him when they were actually in a community, talking about the inventory process. He said, I've got to put this together. So he put together a how to use regrid process that we hope would be helpful for you all. And if you use regrid or if you choose something else, but it's just our kind of, boy, and questions we've had to answer a lot, and how do we take it? So background on what is regrid, maybe you realize I didn't really do that well enough. So gives a little bit of the background, tells you why we use it, again, user friendliness, and because it pulls so many resources into one site. We give a screenshot here, so you all were able to see that a little bit. There's that one red site, so that would have been one of the sites we were looking at in downtown Helena in relation to the overall, wider target area. This talks about how to get access. We get access by going in to regrid, and it gives you a drop-down option, and have the ability, once you get in there, to actually type in the name. Yeah, so I should pause there. This tells you the app that we have. So Kate's telling you that there, it does list the pricing on there. Somehow we must have got it before prices went up. But it talks about the benefits. You can see all the way to the right that has all the bells and whistles. And the one on the left doesn't have as much. But and this is how we grant access to other users. So under this particular area is where I type in the name and address, so that the person who's going to be conducting the inventory in the field can actually enter that survey information. Show you how to create the project. So getting ready for today, I actually created one fourth element to prepare for the overall site. Adding a survey set. These are questions that we ask. Yep, perfect. Okay, so when I was asking you all to help me fill in the questions earlier, these are questions that we commonly use, and therefore those are the ones we chose for today's purpose. You can modify those in any way. They are super easy to enter into regrid. I think we may have a handout of just those that's in the resources too. But again, for us, it's what's the property type? What's the condition of the frame and structure, the roof, the chimney, and then you get down to added notes and make sure we require a photo. When we did this for a community in Pennsylvania that was not bad buildings, but we did use regrid, we actually did not use any of these questions that talked about the structure, the condition, the details of the structure. We did talk about the general shape of it, but we added things in there such as, do you know if a phase 1 or phase 2 environmental site assessment has happened? I'm trying to remember what the other questions were, but it was a variation from this. Again, we did not talk about questions 2 through 6. It was just general building condition. And we did talk about the property type, but we also, because of the folks who were on our team, it was actually economic development folks who had more of a history like that. We were able to ask some other questions about have site assessments happen, and some other details. I apologize, I can't remember, but again, questions are very easy to add and set up, so that's a good thing. Drawing the focus area is pretty easy. I'm sure many of you have done this in a similar platform. Just allows you to make a shape, so you can zero in on this. Top tips for using the mobile app and conducting the survey. Again, once it's actually been populated, conducted the survey, it shows up as purple. So it's helpful for you when you can look at the app or online and you can see that it shows up as purple, you know that it took. When I went to Pennsylvania to, again, not too bad buildings, just inventory process, there were 2 that didn't take. So thankfully we were able to go back in on the back end and just add the same results from the survey and add that back. Tells you how you can edit a survey, and that is that. I'm trying to think. If there's anything else. Maybe I'm trying to think if there were any other contents we had. Yeah. I don't think so either.
Oh, final report.
One last thing I want to show you. We can pull up its final report.
Oh, yeah.
Will you finish working the thing?
Let's set for sure for a second. Okay. So nothing's here. Is the final report on your website?
Yeah, it's data resources. No, the final report is separate. One. It's the example that the
Oh, right.
yeah, that was expandable.
This one?
Yeah,
Done.
I can rename it.
No, should be,
Like this?
no, it should be an actual report.
Oh.
I hope I sent that. Sorry, hanging there.
Report is for. Oh, town Virginia,
Yes.
yeah, it's page
Oh, perfect.
57 of the PDF.
Of what?
Not this one, then let's say go back to the website.
Mhm.
And then go to the bottom.
Right there, yeah, that building resources, page 57.
Thank you so much. Right, I won't go into great detail, but I just want to give you a visual aid from the time I met with the community to provide them an overview of how you can help them, what the benefits could be of actually preparing an inventory, going through the inventory process, the prioritization process, and then comes your final deliverable, which is the final report. This is a draft because we actually have to have the closeout meeting with the community, but this is a community in Virginia. Table of contents, again, introduction. Kind of get into, we lay out the process for red buildings in here. Those were the prioritization criteria for that particular community. One that I thought was interesting is redevelopment potential. How likely do they think this site or area is to have the potential for redevelopment? Also feasibility and affordability. Can it be redeveloped at a relatively low cost, especially when compared to properties where ownership is difficult to determine or where harmful contaminants can complicate redevelopment. So you can see that was some different criteria that they chose to focus on. This highlights who the core team members were, the stakeholders. This is the actual area that was surveyed. You can see it was broken down into 4 zones, sections. Jason, see, the Virginia DEQ, Karen was involved here, so. This is the background information that was pulled. Again, this was information that had already been pulled for another application that had been happening. We were actually able to work with Appalachian Voices, which is a great organization, of course, that focuses on the Appalachian area. So a lot of content had been pulled already, so we were able to reuse that. But this community's plan is to apply for, I can't remember if they did it this past round or if they're going to next year, but to apply for an EPA assessment. So this demographic and information that was pulled here, they are going to be able to use for that application. This talks about history, economic development, decline of the community. This is a really interesting story, and so it was pertinent to this revitalization of the local government. I think it was that their charter was actually revoked, and then they had to reinstate it. So just a series of unfortunate events, but that's highlighted here. One thing I can't believe I didn't talk about is but the term was used earlier as a cheerleader. We always say that a community needs a champion, because we have found that if a community does not have a champion or champions, the project is going to just stall out, and it's not for us to continue to pull that community through. You need that champion to be able to want to bring the community on board to actually, bring change about. So we need to identify that project champion, and that person needs to be on your core team. More data, lots of data. Talking about, natural resources, rivers. Again, this was one that's located within the floodplain, so that's a big area of concern for them. Back to talking about the methodology that was used, the prioritization process, again, we just talked about that criteria that was used here. These are actually screenshots from the maps that we prepared. You can see when you look at the focus area, so that would be the white area that was on regrid that we used earlier. So those are the sites within the white area, and it's like a traffic light, right? So green is good, down to red, it should be demolished. So it's hard to see the screen since you can't zoom in, but you can see those colors in that map indicate the properties that were surveyed and the conditions of them. And this is the breakdown here, this chart here that shows the property type, whether it was spared for, should be demolished, and the total. So for commercial uses, they found that there were 24 commercial sites actually inventoried, and of them, 3 should be demolished, 11 were fair, and 10 were forestry. This is again just highlighting some blight indicators, whether they should be demolished. This is actually the properties. This is helpful for them because these are the properties listed within the FEMA flood zone. So that's a lot for them. Again, something that is going to be a major focus for them and how they can actually look to redevelop. And here's our recommendations, recommending that they partner with the county officials, implement flood mitigation strategies to target the areas adjacent to the Powell River in their commercial district, and address potential or suspected brownfield properties by creating a brownfield inventory. But again, a lot of that content is already happened from the bad buildings inventory. And that is the prioritization grid, again, that you're gonna get. And list the resources. So again, I just wanted you all to see that, to see kind of all the work come together. I hope this is felt more piecemeal than I thought it would, and I apologize for that. I hope that you can pull something out of the presentation today. We would always be happy to chat with any of you about any of the process or steps moving forward. This is just how we have found it to be helpful over the years, and honestly, we're constantly trying to revise and adapt, right? I think that that's kind of the beauty of it, is recognizing that, you know, if something needs to be revised or refreshed, take the time to do that. And, you know, we'd always be happy to share lessons learned with you too. You're going to get a lot of resources from us. If you have any questions on that, I know Maggie will provide my contact information. We'd be happy to answer any questions, and I just appreciate the opportunity, guys. Anybody have any questions?
I was wondering, as you review final reports, is the next step for the community to take that final report to the final grant?
Yes, that's our hope. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So question is, once the community receives the final report, are they going to take that and apply for grants? That is the hope. So I can tell you that Pound, Virginia, that final report I was showing you, we know their goal is to apply for an EPA Brownfield assessment grant at a minimum. I apologize, I've not been the point person on that one, so if there are other projects that they are talking about or grants, I don't have those at the top of mind, but yes, we're hoping that they're gonna take that data and that'll help make that process easier for them. And they have had a fantastic project champion. I hear she is just, I haven't been to that community myself because we've just got several going on right now. But she is, she's all that you would want in a community champion. Just, you know, you can't help but feel the energy when you're around that person. Yeah.
So I think you had maybe mentioned on a call that we had for planning that there was a community or a couple communities who were going to the state legislature to request a state, what's the word looking for? Allocations of funding. Is that, I don't misremember now.
Maybe,
Okay.
so Kate is asking if, in a prior conversation, if a couple of communities were gonna go to the state to request some funding. Maybe it was that we were talking about our state DEP, maybe. They do have please don't ask me what the acronym stands for, but it's DLAP funding, and that is for, getting to actually demolition. As we discussed earlier, that's a major issue for us. And kind of what we have found, right, is that it is, if you don't have a site that's ready for a cleanup grant, and we all know the magnitude of that, how can we help communities when they have multiple sites and don't have the capacity to manage a grant? So the DLAP funding through our state DEP has been really helpful, and I think the demand has become so evident that there are communities going to them, and they do have a pot of money, thankfully, that they allocate that's available each year, and those communities can request it. And we've talked to a couple communities so far. They've had something like 40 buildings torn down, you know, with that allocation, and mostly they're residential buildings. But I mean, that's been a real showstopper for some, is not being able to get money for demolition.
Yeah.
That's what we were talking about.
I think that would be a great one to provide
Okay,
more information.
perfect.
Because we're,
Happy to do that.
yeah, because that's a huge problem across Region 8, and there's no resources for addressing these buildings.
You're so right.
Yeah.
Yes. And we actually are, so Marshall University has some funding they can use, I think, for some demolition, and we are starting to get some to help for asbestos abatement. That's also, an area of concern too. So our state provided us with some money, and we're actually helping a community. Our first pilot one is taken off the ground in West Virginia, and, we have another one, it looks like gearing up too, again, for how do you pay for asbestos abatement? That's a very hard one too.
Is that privately owned building or?
No, I don't think that one matters. I'm pretty sure the one through us, I don't think that one matters. I don't think DLAP, the one through the DEP, I need to get the criteria on that one, and I will follow up with you on that one. Because that's the challenge too, right, is, it's something we talk about a lot, right? So we know that we have a site where it was Shell was the pollutant, right? And so, but now, you know, we're paying for it, right, through a cleanup grant, we collectively, but, you know, it was at one time owned by Shell. An internal frustration. Thanks, everyone.